My guest today attempted to take his own life at the age of 9 with his PlayStation cord. Now he speaks to parents and youth, helping them identify signs of depression and suicidal behavior. Welcome back, Barry.
Yes, it's good to be back, Maggie.
Yeah. So take us back to that time, that day when you thought of taking your life at the age of 9.
Yes. Well, that is something that can be tough sometimes to talk about even today. Just considering there's a lot of teenagers, a lot of young people right now struggling with that. You know, being a young person, being First Nation, sometimes there's some things and dynamics in that life, you know, for young First Nations males. But for me, the issue that I had was feeling hopeless. Because in my life, I struggled with depression. I struggled with my own self-image. I didn't believe in myself. And a lot of this had to do with the lifestyle I lived with my family. My mother and my father, my father was, for one thing, not in my life, but my mother was involved in drugs and alcohol. My stepdad was also involved in drugs and alcohol. And yeah, no, this is a little bit tough to talk about because just yesterday, actually, there was another young person that had committed suicide, and you know, my heart just goes out to the people because at that moment in my life, I thought life was not worth living. You know, all the things that were surrounding my life, everything that was going on, all the emotions that were in play there, I couldn't handle it. I was 9 years old in grade 3. I took that PlayStation cord, I wrapped it around my neck, and I said, I can't do this anymore.
Wow. But you're here today because that PlayStation cord was not successful.
That's right. That cord broke, and the glory of God, you know, just came into my life, surrounded me, and transformed who I was because I went from a hopeless child to a child full of hope because of the message of Jesus Christ.
And now you get to share that message with so many people, and you're doing so many great things by just sharing the message of that there's hope through depression, there's hope through these suicidal thoughts, that you don't actually have to do them. What are some things that you're finding young people need to hear?
Well, a lot of times young people don't believe in themselves. You know, they don't think that their life is worth living. They see their circumstances and it surrounds them, and it kind of just suffocates them and suffocates the life in them. So when you talk about depression, and I talked about this last time I was on the show, but depression, it kind of just takes over who you are. I know with mental health, that's a big topic now across Canada. Not just in First Nations communities or Indigenous communities, but of course all over the world. But a lot of teenagers, they need to hear that someone's there for them. They need to know that someone's willing to listen. And sometimes they don't feel like talking right away. Sometimes it takes time. You know, you got to build relationship with some of these people. You know, I for sure didn't want to talk to anybody right away. I needed to, you know, of course, get close to somebody before I opened up to them.
And why is it important for you, Barry, to dedicate your life to this mission and this message? Because your story, you could just keep it as your story and not want to share it with others. Why is it important for you to reach out to young people and parents?
Well, the truth is, at first, I didn't want to share. I didn't want nobody to know about what I went through because, for one thing, I was embarrassed. Another thing, I didn't want people to think that there was a problem with me. I didn't want them to look at me and say, you know, that guy is mentally challenged or has a mental illness, because I didn't understand anything about mental health. I didn't understand what mental illness, right? So at first, it was hard. But as I started to share my story, as I started to open up and allow myself to share, I found that there was a lot of young people, a lot of people, even in general, not just young, that were really taking what I was saying and their lives were being transformed and changed because of my story, my testimony. And they saw somebody who was going through something difficult, similar to them or in some way maybe, but just something different was changed me. You know, something changed inside my life. I wasn't the same. And I realized that what I went through was something that was going to help other people because they saw my story as a hope story.
Now, we know record numbers of young people in First Nations communities that are taking their lives or choosing suicide as their way out. You have a new role now. You're with the Tribal Council Education Authority, 5 schools that you're helping to spread this message of hope. What are you telling these young people today?
Yes, so Kitaski now Tribal Council Education Authority, is the second of its kind in Canada currently. It's just like a school board, and it kind of eliminates a lot of the funding gaps in our First Nations communities. And because of that extra funding, they're able to hire people like me or other specialists and to go into these schools. So these 5 schools that I'm working with in Northern Alberta right now, I'm able to go in and, of course, share a little bit of my story, provide training, provide workshops, do surveys, environmental scans, and kind of see what's going on in the community, what's going on in the school, what's going on in the students, right? And so with all that being said, I can work on topics of bullying because that's one of the leading causes for suicide, right? I can look at other mental health initiatives and be able to just educate these kids, show my support, be there for them, and work with the school counselors to see that mental health is something that is considered good in our communities. Yeah.
And you talked to me about the importance of you being an Indigenous person coming to these young people and saying, look at me, there is hope. The power of your story because of your heritage plays a key point in this revolution of this community changing itself. Tell me about that.
So of course, being First Nation, at the time growing up, I didn't understand that people put a lot of stigma around First Nation people. I experienced racism as a kid. I had a teacher that looked at me once and said, I don't want you hanging around with my daughter, your kind of people, right? And at the time I didn't understand, but I knew something that it hurt, right? But I understood growing up and going through my just becoming an adult, for example, I started to understand what it meant to be Indigenous, what it meant to be First Nation, to be a part of that group, a hurting group across Canada, and a struggling group in many areas. And I said, if I'm First Nation and I go into a community and I talk to teenagers who are also Indigenous, First Nation, Aboriginal, then I'm able to connect with them at a level that is more personal. And they see that, there's a lot of teenagers that come up to me and say, I want to be like you, or I want to do what you do. But they come up to me because they feel a connection, kind of like a family connection, and I really do sense that. And I'm really proud of being Indigenous. I'm proud of my heritage.
We're proud of your heritage too. I want to leave with hope because I know the last time you were here, you said that was kind of the pivotal point for you in deciding to change your life from that day when you were 9 years old wanting to take your life. Why is hope so important, and how could it be a powerful factor in changing your life?
Yes. So let's just take a step back here. Right now, as we're talking, there are teenagers, young adults, and elderly people experiencing thoughts of suicide right now as we speak. Every 40 seconds, somebody attempts suicide and succeeds. And a lot of people right now are struggling with who they are. They don't have a sense of identity. A lot of people right now are feeling like this is their last day, their last breath. And for me to be able to say, hey, take a breath, to breathe, to understand that God has given us a breath of life, that there's a reason that we can breathe. When we feel overwhelmed, we can breathe. But to know that hope exists, because hope is something that's greater than hopelessness. You see, I thought that I was hopeless. I thought my situation was hopeless, but I found that my situation birthed an amazing amount of hope. My story is now a story of hope, not a story of hopelessness. And I want that to, again, resonate with the people out there, because I want them to know that hope is there. It's available to them, not just through counseling, not just through therapy, but just there for them through Jesus Christ. And I want them to know that hope exists, because it's there.
Thank you so much, Barry.
You're welcome.
Hope is just a phone call away. Our prayer lines are at the bottom of the screen, 1-866-273-4444. Talk to one of our prayer partners. If you feel right now that you want to take your life, if you just feel like there's no point in living, call our prayer lines. Give Jesus a chance. There is hope. Your life is there for a reason. You are alive for a reason. He's created you for a reason. Our prayer partners will remind you of that. Well, coming up shortly, a message of hope by Pastor Robbie Simons. Stay with us.